Tuesday, October 22nd, 2013. Welcome to the Southbridge School Committee meeting. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. We're moving on to agenda item number 2, public input. Is there anybody from the public that would like to speak this evening? Is there anybody from the public that would like to address the school committee this evening? Anybody who would like to address the school committee this evening? Seeing no one, thank you. We're going to move on. I'd like to call the meeting to order at, what time do you have?
7:02.
7:02 p.m. Roll call, please.
Mrs. Congdon?
Present.
Dr. D'Amico?
Excused?
Mrs. Donovan?
Present.
Mrs. McLaughlin?
Present?
Dr. O'Leary?
He's absent.
Mrs. Quinney?
Present.
Thank you. Moving on to agenda item 5, the approval of the October 8th, 2013 school committee meeting minutes. Are there any corrections, additions, substitutions? Anybody? I do have one. It was brought to my attention that under agenda item number 4, also in attendance was the Director of Operations, Roland Gabry. If we could just add that.
Okay.
Do I have a motion to accept the minutes as amended to reflect Mr. Gabry's presence?
So moved. Second.
It's okay.
Dr. D'Amico?
Dr. O'Leary, where? Present.
She's
She's excused.
Okay, sorry. Mrs. Donovan?
Yes.
Mrs. McLaughlin?
Yes.
Mrs. Quinney?
Yes.
Dr. O'Leary?
I'll abstain. I haven't got a chance to look at that.
Thank you. Moving on to agenda item number 6, Chairwoman's announcements. Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, I'm sorry, Mrs. Congdon.
She was the first.
Didn't vote. Under the minutes? For the approval of the
Oh, I'm
minutes?
sorry. Mrs. Congdon.
Yes.
Sorry about that.
That's okay, thank you. Thank you. Under agenda item number 6, Chairwoman's announcements. I have several announcements this evening that I'd like to make. As you are probably aware, at the October 8th school committee meeting, Mrs. Woodruff announced her intent to resign as both chair and member of the Southbridge School Committee. Her resignation became effective immediately upon receipt by the town clerk's office on October 9th. The Southbridge School Committee would like to thank Mrs. Woodruff for her many years of dedicated service to the community as a school committee member, and wishes her success in her future endeavors. Mrs. Woodruff's resignation presented a novel situation for the school committee regarding the process by which her replacement, both as chair and member, would unfold. There is a clear process under Mass General Law 4111 as to how to fill a vacancy on the school committee. I have already contacted Town Council Chairman David Langevin to provide official notification that a vacancy had been created on this board. A joint meeting of the school committee and the Educational Human Services Subcommittee will take place on Tuesday, October 29th at 6 o'clock in this room to define the process for filling the vacancy. More information will follow at that meeting, and a posting will be placed on the district website with specific details. In terms of filling the vacancy of the chair, our policies provide we are subject to Robert's rules. We consulted legal counsel for direction and felt it best that counsel provide a public explanation tonight regarding the process as a result of Mrs. Woodruff's resignation. So I would like to now turn the meeting over to Attorney D. Moscas. Mr. Moscas?
Thank you, Madam Chair. The vice chair did ask our firm to consider this question of whether there would have to be, how the process is to fill the vacancy relative to Mrs. Woodruff's resignation. The policies of the school committee in discussing this subject are general in nature. So there is no specific guidance that has been provided by those policies. And under the policy, if there is no specific guidance on a particular matter, parliamentary matter, that you go to Robert's rules. Robert's rules state that the office of chair, unless specifically provided for under the policies of the committee, is handled through the assumption of the office by the vice chair, and that the vice chair automatically becomes chair upon the vacancy becoming effective, which has been accomplished in Southbridge because the resignation of the chair was filed with the city clerk, town clerk. Therefore, there is no election for the office of chair because we had a vice chair, and so the vice chair assumed that office. That assumption of office is common in public offices, as we can recall from the president, if the president was a vacancy. Unfortunately, with President Kennedy, Lyndon Johnson automatically became the president. When we've had governors leave office, that the lieutenant governor then steps into the office of the governor. So this is not something unusual. It is a common practice that the vice chair would assume that office upon the vacancy being present. Consequently, Mrs. McLaughlin is the chair of the Southbridge School Committee now, and no further action is required by the school committee. However, there is now a vacancy in the office of vice chair. And under that situation, since there is no assistant vice chair or something similar to that, there would have to be an election to fill that office of vice chair. And I understand there is an agenda item relative to that particular matter for the consideration of the school committee. So the school committee can tonight elect a vice chair, or they could obviously postpone it to allow some thought about that and have it at a future meeting. But as far as the chair is concerned, I just repeating myself, but in summary, Mrs. McLaughlin is the chair of the school committee at this time.
Thank you, Mr. Moskos. Does anybody have any questions for Attorney Moskos? Thank you very much. In order to maintain proper sequence, I will be moving and grouping all organizational items under agenda item number 6, that being 12D, a vote to elect the vice chair, and the issue covered under the addendum. But first, I would just like to thank Attorney Moskos for joining us tonight to provide that explanation and clarification. I'd also like to thank my fellow school committee members and the superintendent for their support during this transition. Please rest assured we're all committed to working as a team to make the Southbridge Public School System a source of pride for this entire community. Our focus will continue to remain on improving student achievement and advancing our status with the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education. We recently took the unprecedented step of establishing a vision, protocols, and goals for this school committee. We look forward to establishing district-wide goals with the superintendent in the very near future. How we act and react to the challenges ahead of us will have a profound impact on all the students in our schools, and we are asking each and every person in our community to support these efforts. As part of our commitment to our roles and responsibilities, I just wanted to make the public aware of the following. Tomorrow evening, there will be a committee of the whole budget meeting at 6:30 in room M100 at on 25 Cole Avenue, the administrative building. On Monday, October 28th, the superintendent and several members of the school committee will attend the Massachusetts Education Partnership to learn more about the Common Core, the implementation of Common Core. The Commissioner Mitchell Chester will be a featured speaker, and we look forward to speaking with him as a delegation to assure him of our dedication to improving student achievement in the Southbridge Public School System. On Wednesday, October 30th, several committee members will attend the Attorney General's Open Meeting Law Forum at Quinsigamond Community College. This training is offered annually by the Attorney General's office to provide guidance to all public officials. And we will also be working with the Massachusetts Association of School Committees under their District Governance Support Project. This groundbreaking innovative partnership is designed to help school leaders understand their unique roles and responsibilities and to build positive, effective relationships and adopt governance practices that support student achievement. All of this will be at no cost to the district. Massachusetts General Law 7138M dictates that the school committee meet at least every other month with a student advisory committee to consist of 5 members to be composed of students elected by the student body of the high school. I will work with Ms. Brito, who's not here this evening, to schedule those meetings in the future. And now, at the suggestion of Attorney Moscas, I am going to move Agenda Item 12D, the vote to appoint a vice chair for the school committee for the remainder of the 2013-2014 school year. Is there a motion?
So moved. I appoint Ms. Kara Donovan as vice chair.
Nominate
Nominate.
Kara Donovan as vice chair.
Second?
Second, thank you. Are there any other nominations? Any other nominations? Seeing none, we'd like to vote to appoint Ms. Kara Donovan vice chair for the school committee for the remainder of the 2013-2014 school year. Roll call, please.
Mrs. Donovan?
Yes.
Mrs. McLaughlin?
Yes.
Dr. O'Leary?
Yes.
Mrs. Quinney?
Yes.
Mrs. Congdon?
Yes.
And Dr. D'Amico?
She's excused. She's traveling. Thank you for that. Mrs. Donovan, do you have anything that you'd like to say?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would like to say that I am very grateful for the support of my fellow committee members to become vice chair. I take this role very seriously. I'm very excited about the opportunity that this will bring us. I think that I bring a lot to the table. We have a lot of work to be done. I'm very excited for the opportunity to work together with everybody, teachers, superintendent, everybody up here with me on the school committee, to improve our schools, to improve student achievement, and to overall enhance the education in our town. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mrs. Donovan. And now I'd like to add under agenda item number 6, the addendum that was previously posted. It's a vote to suspend the rules of policy BDE to allow Mrs. McLaughlin to continue to chair the negotiation subcommittee through the current contract negotiation with the Southbridge Education Association. We need a vote to suspend the rules, and then we need to vote on the motion. This, if I can just explain quickly, this is necessary because we do have a school committee policy BDE, which states that the school committee chair is an ex officio member of subcommittees. However, we are mostly through with negotiation with the Southbridge Education Association, and speaking with the superintendent, he recommended that I remain as chair, and I'm willing to do that, and I thank him for that, but it is necessary that we, A, vote to suspend the rules, and B, vote on the motion. So do I have a motion to suspend the rules
I move to suspend the rules.
of policy BDE
Yes.
to allow Mrs. McLaughlin to continue to chair negotiations subcommittee through the current contract negotiation with the Southbridge Education Association. Is there a second?
Second.
Mrs. Congdon has seconded the motion. Roll call vote.
Mrs. McLaughlin?
Apologize. Is there any discussion? I apologize. Okay, roll call vote, please.
Mrs. McLaughlin?
Yes.
Dr. O'Leary?
Yes.
Mrs. Quinney?
Yes.
Mrs. Congdon?
Yes.
Dr. D'Amico?
She's excused.
Mrs. Donovan?
Yes.
Thank you. Motion
Motion carries,
carries.
sorry.
It's okay. And now we need a vote on the motion itself. A motion to allow Mrs. McLaughlin to continue to chair the negotiation subcommittee through the current contract negotiation with the Southbridge Education Association.
So moved?
Second?
Mrs. Donovan made the motion. Mrs. Congdon seconded the motion. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, roll call vote, please.
Dr. O'Leary?
Yes.
Mrs. Quinney?
Yes.
Mrs. Congdon?
Yes.
Dr. D'Amico excused. Mrs. Donovan?
Yes.
Mrs. McLaughlin?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Welcome, Mr. Nemberko. You missed all the fun. Agenda item number 7, reports. We have a representative of the Student Advisory Committee. Ms. Rosa Brito could not be in attendance this evening. So in her stead, we is capably handled by Kenny Allard, who's filling in for her. Welcome, Kenny.
Good evening. The 8th grade students went to Bay Path today. The 8th grade band will be going to Yukon. Middle school Aspira will have a walkathon on Friday, October 25th from 3 to 6 p.m. Arsenic and Old Lace will be presented by the Middle and High School Drama Club this Thursday and Friday. The Thursday will be the dinner and the show. Dinner starts at 5:45. The show starts at 7 p.m. Friday, just the show will start at 7 p.m. That is directed by Miss Miriam Kranz and myself, Kenny Allard. The varsity football team will be playing at 7 in Leicester. The students' IDs are now instituted. Picture retakes will be November 20th. First quarter ends October 30th. Homecoming was very successful. The seniors were honored and the dance went very well. There will be a school council meeting on Tuesday, October 29th at SMHS Library at 6 p.m. with Mrs. Allen. Parents are welcome to attend if interested in participating. Friday, November 1st will be the first early release day. 201 sophomores and juniors took the PSATs. ACTs are this Saturday. Mr. Thomo and Mr. Carrero have come into partnership with the Worcester County Sheriff Department with the help of the Student Council to sponsor a coat drive for those in need in the local area. Taking donations for the next 3 weeks. It can also be donated at school or at school events. The flu clinic will be at SMHS on Thursday, October 31st for faculty and students. All information needed is found at our school website. Get your flu vaccine. Thank you.
That's it. Thank you, Kenny. Thank you for those announcements. Agenda item number 8. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah.
If I might, just
Absolutely.
add to Ken, not to say you missed anything, Ken, but just to add a little bit on the homecoming. I just want to put kudos out to the football team and the cheerleaders, as well as the hundreds of folks that went to homecoming. Unfortunately, it wasn't on Friday Night Frenzy, but it had to be the most exciting game in the entire district with a double overtime win at the last play on the 2-yard line. You can't ask for anything better than that, guys. So kudos to the team and the students and the coaches and the cheerleaders. It was a exciting, really, really great showing of Southbridge pride, guys. Thank you.
Thank you. School committee reports. Can I, a report of the curriculum subcommittee, Mrs. Donovan?
Thank you, Madam Chair. There is no report and no meeting scheduled as of this time. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Policy subcommittee, Mrs. Quinney?
Thank you, Madam Chair. The Policy Subcommittee met on Wednesday, October 16th. Present were myself, Jill Congdon, and Lauren McLaughlin. During our meeting, we reviewed the wellness policy, policy ADF, as well as the act relative to school nutrition and Mass Regulation 105, which deals with wellness policies. At that time, it became apparent that the school district needs to have in place a wellness committee, which we've added to the agenda to be voted on later. So we will be voting on that later. We also discussed and have voted to move forward a new policy, JICFB, which is the bullying policy. And there were acts in 2013 which changed the language within that policy to include as not, sorry, thank you. right there. In addition to students being able to be bullies, educators, administrators, school nurses, cafeteria workers, custodians, bus drivers, athletic coaches, advisors, advisors to an extracurricular activity, or paraprofessionals are also included in that, but not limited to those school staff. So that has been added to our policy JICFB, which we will vote on later. We have gone through the policies in Section A to this point, and moving forward at our next meeting, we will be reviewing policies in Section B of the policy manual. And that meeting has yet to be scheduled. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Quinney. The negotiation subcommittee, the negotiation subcommittee will be meeting this Thursday with the Southbridge Education Association at 4:30 in room M100 to resume and continue with negotiations. Family and Community Engagement Subcommittee, Mrs. Congdon.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. Our next meeting will be Monday, November 4th at 6:30 in room N100. Sandra Aponte, the president of the Southbridge Elementary PTA, will be our first speaker of the monthly speaker series. And we will also be analyzing the results of the survey and planning a parent workshop that we're hoping to hold in November. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Congdon. A report of the SPED-PAC liaison, Mrs. Quinney.
Thank you, Madam Chair. On October 17th from 6 to 8, there was a well-attended presentation by Anita Poulin on sensory processing disorder. She explained how the body takes in sensory information, how it then processes it, and then how it produces an output to that. It was a very interactive time. Parents asked a lot of questions, some very specific to their children, and questions regarding how their children are processing sensory information. Their next workshop will be held on November 14th, again from 6 to 8 in room N100. It will be presented by Dr. Jennifer Connors from the Southbridge Family Chiropractic Practice. Following the presentation, they had a brief meeting in which a vote was taken to elect Priscilla Holtz as the vice chair to replace Crystal Carrier, who resigned because her family is moving. The SPED-PAC would like to thank Crystal for her dedicated service to the SPED-PAC and welcome Priscilla in her new role as vice chair. And that is all. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Quinney. Next on agenda item number 9, we have a presentation this evening. I am pleased to welcome to the podium Ms. Severina Rios from Aspira. Welcome, Mrs. Rios. Do you need help? Do you need?
Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the school committee, Superintendent Nemberko, and citizens of Southbridge. Everybody knows that I'm Severina Rios. I'm a retired teacher. I spent 34 years teaching the teachers of Southbridge and Worcester. And tonight I'm here to represent Senator Richard Moore and Aspira of Massachusetts. On October 11th, as part of the Hispanic Heritage Month, Aspira of Massachusetts held a function to recognize Southbridge High School Hispanic alumni from 1975 to 2000. At this activity, Senator Moore presented Aspira with a replica of El Velorio, a painting by Francisco Oller, impressionist from the second half of the 19th century. The Velorio, which translates to English, the wake, represents a Spanish custom very popular in the Hispanic world. The death of a child younger than 7 years old. This angel is going to heaven to advocate for the loved ones he or she leaves behind. Therefore, his departure is celebrated with a big fiesta, attended by relatives, neighbors, the priest, and even animals. There is dancing, singing, storytelling, eating, and drinking. And all of this was captured by this Puerto Rican author, Francisco Oyer, in this painting. It is my great honor to present this work of art to the Southbridge Public Schools. And Senator Moore suggested that the perfect place for this painting to be exhibited would be the library at the Southbridge Middle High School. Thank you very much. And here
Thank
is
you
a
very
little-
much. Does anybody have any questions?
Thank you myself.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
You're very welcome.
The school committee thanks you for your presentation, accepts your donation, and will direct the superintendent to place the picture.
Thank you.
Thank you. Agenda item number 10, the report of the finance director. Mrs. Sheridan is not here this evening. She's probably preparing for our meeting tomorrow, and so there's no report tonight. Agenda item number 11 is report of the superintendent. Mr. Nebrico.
Well, thank you very much, and I want to thank Spiro for making that fine donation to the school. It will be hung in a place of honor at Middle High School library as requested, and it's also the most appropriate place for it. Sorry for being late. I was at the Lions Club making a presentation to the Lions Club. I always enjoy speaking with the various service organizations. And as I said to them, they're the opinion leaders and business owners in the community. And they had a full house. That's 50, 60 people there. And I cut my dinner short so I could speak. And basically I spoke about school system reorganization and the goals of the school committee to make Southbridge Public Schools a place where they could be proud to have in the school system. And I always talk about education by zip code. I always talk about the fact that, that property values and business values are affected by the quality of the school system. And that as businessmen and leaders, they have a vested interest in the success of the school system. And so they appreciated that and thanked me for being there. I met earlier this week with Mrs. Congdon, and we were talking about a host of things. And one of the questions that came up was about MCAS test, and hopefully we could do something for parents to better understand it. And this morning, on Tuesdays, we always meet with our district leadership team, and we're talking about it. And we thought that one of the services that we could provide to the parents, the community, would be to unravel the alphabet soup that we educators speak in. We have MCAS, we have PARC tests, we have SATs, we have DIBELS, all of these acronyms. Originally, I wanted to call it acronymania, and every organization has a specific vocabulary that kind of sets them apart from everybody else, and you're not a member of our club if you don't understand it. And I think that we as educators have to recognize that the community and parents are our customers. Students are the products that we send out there. And in order for them to support what we do, they have to better understand some of the measures that we have in schools. So we've tentatively scheduled, and we'll advertise this through the help of the PTOs and Family and Community Engagement Subcommittee for November 20th at 6:30 at the Middle High School. And we're going to put together a program where it's going to appeal from elementary all the way through high school. We want the elementary parents to understand the various tests, standardized tests that we give them, and be able to work with their students when they more fully understand that. Middle high schools, we have obviously the whole host of tests, and then this year the Commonwealth has put together something called PARC. And what that is that the Common Core that's been adopted by 40 states also has a test that goes along with it as a pilot. And most of the school districts in the Commonwealth have been selected to pilot this. And one of the concerns we have is about over-testing kids. And that's one of the questions we have, and we'll be continuing to work with the state to say that if kids take the PARCC test, will they also be required to take the MCAS? And some school districts are opting to have the PARCC test count instead of the MCAS in lieu of, but then that really creates a problem when we're trying to understand how well they did in the curriculum, how well they scored in the test, and when we disaggregate the scores and the strands that the students have performed in, whether they're high or low, it's going to be kind of hard to mix the two tests. So that's one of the issues. But I think unraveling alphabet soup and being able to better explain all of the acronyms that we use and have the parents better understand the various tests that are there will move our district forward. And one of the areas that we're particularly concerned about is with the SAT and the PSAT. Again, here I am, preliminary scholastic aptitude test and the scholastic aptitude test. And some kids opt to take the ACT, which is the American College Testing Program. And the basic difference is if you want to go to the East Coast or West Coast schools, you take the SATs. If you want to apply in the middle of the country, you take the ACTs, and they're very different tests. And then the other thing we want to do with this is develop a program so the college when college visits come, college counselors come, it's more and better disseminated to all of the parents. So I think it's important that parents start learning about the colleges, preferably in the late middle school years. It's not too early, rather than waiting until you're a sophomore or junior in high school. So that's the plans that we have, and we want to work with all of the PTOs and everything else so we can get a full house. We can break the session up into various interest groups over the course of the evening, and it'll be Act 1 of our program to do that. So that's the report that I have this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Nembrico. Moving on to school committee actions, agenda item A, vote to submit a letter to Senator Richard T. Moore in support of Senate Bill 1804, which reads, an act prohibiting a municipality or regional school district from using public funds or other public resources for the recruitment of students from outside the municipality or regional school district. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Motion made by Mrs. Donovan, seconded by Dr. O'Leary. Is there any discussion? Any discussion? Okay. Thank you. Seeing no discussion, roll call vote, please.
Mrs. Quinney?
Yes.
Mrs. Congdon?
Yes.
Mrs. Donovan?
Yes.
Mrs. McLaughlin?
Yes.
Dr. O'Leary?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Agenda item number V, a vote to appoint Ms. Julianne Collins as recording secretary for the school committee for the 2013-2014 school year. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Mrs. Congdon, seconded by Mrs. Quinney. And I have a roll call vote for that too, please.
Mrs. Congdon?
Yes.
Mrs. Donovan?
Yes.
Mrs. McLaughlin?
Yes.
Dr. O'Leary?
Yes.
Mrs. Quinney?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Agenda item C, vote to establish an ad hoc wellness committee. Actually, committee is to be named the School Wellness Advisory Council. It's a standing committee under the law. Is that correct, Mrs. Quinney?
That is
okay. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Motion made by Mrs. Quinney, seconded by Mrs. Congdon. Is there any discussion? Yes, Mrs. Quinney.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This committee is required by law, and at our policy meeting, we set out what expectations we would have of the committee moving forward to give the community an understanding of what this committee would entail. The first objective of the committee would be drafting a district wellness policy that would be specific to the health and wellness needs of the students of Southbridge, and that would replace our current policy, ADF. Upon drafting that policy, it would be the expectation that they would present that policy to the policy subcommittee. After that, the further objectives for the year would include to evaluate current school programs and policies that promote wellness, such as health education and services, physical education, school nutrition, opportunities for physical activity in and around the school, the nutrition environment within the school. Also, it would be to identify health and wellness services within the community that are currently being utilized by students, and identify wellness services that are not being provided to students at this time. The last objective would be to recommend wellness initiatives and community partnerships to optimize student wellness. The appointments will be made by the superintendent, and appointments will last for 1 year. If community members have any interest in sitting on the wellness committee, we would ask that you send your letters of interest to the superintendent's office at 25 Cole Ave. Groups within the community that would be especially beneficial would be organizations that work with youth within the community, health organizations within the community, such as primary care physicians, hospital staff, etc. And I think that pretty much sums that up.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there any other discussion? Seeing none, we have a vote to establish a school wellness advisory council. A committee, I apologize. Roll call vote.
Mrs. Donovan?
Yes.
Mrs. McLaughlin?
Yes.
Dr. O'Leary?
Yes.
Mrs. Quinney?
Yes.
Mrs. Congdon?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Agenda item D was previously voted, so we're moving on to agenda item E. This is a vote to conditionally approve international student travel to Italy in April 2015, as presented by Ms. Lisa Camarda, pending final approval by the school committee as detailed in district policy JJH. Please note that final approval will not be granted by the school committee until all preparations for the trip have been completed, including but not limited to all logistical details involving transportation, accommodation arrangements, supervision, and funding. The school committee requires that final approval be sought no less than 90 days prior to the scheduled trip dates. So this is a vote to conditionally approve the process to go forward. Is there any, do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Mrs. Congdon made the motion. Dr. O'Leary seconded. Is there any discussion? Dr. O'Leary.
Not having the opportunity or experience of putting together something of this magnitude with students in a foreign country and travel and staying and all that, is it, I guess I'm informational, my own curiosity, is it a routine that you would be all set 3 months before you're ready to go?
Yeah.
To me, it seems like I'd never be there 3 months before. I'd be up to the last minute.
When that policy was drafted, I get what you're saying. When we drafted the policy last spring, we looked at a lot of other model policies from other districts, and this is pretty standard, because by then they should know what flights they're going to have, their hotels, if they can all pay for the trip, how that's going. I don't know if Ms. Camarda would like to come up and...
That's fine. I think I can answer your question, Ms. Camarda. It's okay. Is that when a trip like this has fundraising involved, and you're dealing with minors and so on, you have to be extra careful. So all of these arrangements have to be made well in advance for group travel, and so all the transportation, the housing, the meals, the chaperones, all has to be done. So that's done well in advance of 90 days.
Okay, thank you.
Is there any other discussion? Seeing none, can I have a roll call vote, please?
Mrs. McLaughlin?
Yes.
Dr. O'Leary?
Yes.
Mrs. Quinney?
Yes.
Mrs. Congdon?
Yes.
Mrs. Donovan?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Thank you. Agenda item 12F. This is a vote to conditionally approve international student travel to Spain in April 2014, as presented by Mr. Jonathan Matusco, pending final approval by the school committee as detailed in district policy JJH. Final approval will not be granted by the school committee until all preparations for the trip have been completed, including but not limited to all logistical details involving transportation, accommodation arrangements, supervision, and funding. The school committee requires that final approval be sought no less than 90 days prior to the scheduled trip dates. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Motion made by Mrs. Condon, seconded by Dr. O'Leary. Is there any discussion here? Seeing none, can I have a roll call vote?
Dr. O'Leary?
Yes.
Mrs. Quinney?
Yes.
Mrs. Congdon?
Yes.
Mrs. Donovan?
Yes.
Mrs. McLaughlin?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Agenda item number 13, is there any unfinished business? Anything? Good. Seeing none, moving on to agenda item 14, new business. This is the first reading of policy file JICFB, bullying prevention. Do I have a motion?
So moved?
Motion to what?
Want to waive the reading?
I'd like to make a comment on a part of it. I don't want to know if we all have to, if you have to read it to get to my point or not. I know that I've looked at it, I don't see it in here, and maybe just a clarification on my part.
If we get a second, then we'll have discussion, and
Sure.
you can lead the discussion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you.
Sorry, what was the motion?
Motion was the first reading of policy file JICFB, bullying prevention.
I'm sorry.
Mrs. Congdon made the motion, Mrs. Donovan seconded. And Dr. O'Leary.
Yes, ma'am, thank you, Madam Chair. So I have this ongoing dilemma in my own head about a certain component of the bullying thing. I have 6 children. 4 of them have been through the Southbridge school system, still going. And there's been an occasion, you can imagine, any of us with children can imagine that on occasion through the years of school that some episode of this nature has occurred. The way, I don't see anything in here, and I know to address what I'm about to ask or bring up, and I know that in the past there's been, I'm not sure, disclarity, if that's the right word, anyway to me, that if someone is being bullied and that person defends themselves, that person is in trouble too. Is that what it is currently?
Well, we don't condone fighting.
Understood,
Okay,
understood.
it's number one, okay?
Yeah?
And then one of the goals is when a student is bullied, what we would like the student to do is to go to an adult and report that bullying, and then it becomes the responsibilities of the adults in charge to intercede on behalf.
Understood.
Okay? And if we said that in my days, when somebody pushed me, I pushed them back, and boom, and then we would have chaos. So the goal of that is, and obviously, this is a sensitive issue, number one. Number two, it's out there on a regular basis. And this whole issue with cyberbullying is a whole brand-new ballgame throughout the country. And then just to be able to figure out exactly what to do, it becomes situational. So it's hard to create rules saying in case A, this happens, B, this happens. So it becomes, and then I've heard, and what we won't allow to happen is well, boys will be boys, or this is what happened when I was in school. That's unacceptable. We have to deal with each one of those cases as it comes forth. And one of the things we look for is that for administrators and teachers is to use good judgment. And I can't legislate good judgment. That's the hardest part of the job.
I'm sorry, Buzz, good judgment in reference to what?
In reference to dealing with the issue, as one is the self-defense, when is the student, that's what you're asking about, retaliation.
Absolutely, and I don't see any component of that in there, and I have to tell you that when in the past, when I've gone through this and gone and sat with the vice principal and the principal on a number of occasions with different incidents, that there's been nothing about when a person feels it's necessary to keep themselves from bodily injury to defend themselves. In one instance, that both kids were being suspended, and you could tell the whole thing. One kid was kicked, and then he walked away, and he gets kicked, and he walked away, and the kid pushed or kicked him the third time, and he turned around and he hit him, and it was over. And both kids got suspended for that. And I don't want. I say it to my patients, I say it to my own children, I am not going to be part of creating a society of victims. If you know there's no way out, if you know that you are in grave physical danger, that it's coming at you, that's why, bullies do these kind of things. They're not going to do it in front of the teacher. They're not going to do it in front of the office. They're going to do it in a place where there is nobody, and they already know this. So they look for an opportunity for something like that. And if you're stuck in that spot and there's no way out, geez Louise, we can't be victims. So I guess my point is that, as I guess you alluded to it, Buzz, but there's nothing in here. There has to be some sort of area where a student can potentially be exonerated from a suspension or other disciplinary action when that student has acted in a way to defend himself.
I think this is where, again, judgment comes in. If you're protecting yourself from bodily harm,
Yeah.
That's what you're talking about.
Absolutely,
And so in
right.
that case, it's a different situation.
Okay.
But if the guy pushes me and I don't like it and I smack him back, that's not...
I agree with
You
that
see,
too,
so
right.
It's a case by case, there are no two cases alike, and so on. And if there is a group of kids attacking you, have a right to defend yourself.
Surely, right.
So those are things that will be taken into consideration. But it's difficult for us to you go to the lawyer's office, there's stacks of books back there, right?
Yeah.
And you can't define everything. So that's one of the issues that we have to operate on the best judgment of the administrators and teachers that we have. And one of the things we do is we have more than one person looking at it now. So it's not an individual that's going to make the decision.
Yeah.
So, and before we deal with a student and punish a student, my expectation is more than one adult if it's a serious, severe situation. Okay, I think that'll work. And then we have experienced assistant principals.
Yeah.
There's a big difference now.
Well, I appreciate that, and I'm glad that it's out and that it's not necessarily black and white, so a kid doesn't have to feel that he has to sit there and be physically damaged for fear of getting in trouble for that. So I'm glad you listened to it, guys. Thank you.
Is there any other discussion? Mrs. Quinney?
I just wanted to reiterate that because Massachusetts General Law 71, Chapter 37 was amended by Chapter 38, Section 72 and 74 in the Acts of 2013. So the language of the actual law changed. Therefore, we need to change our policy to reflect those changes. And they changed to expand the definition of a perpetrator. Perpetrator would be the bully, to include a member of a school staff, including but not limited to an educator, administrator, school nurse, cafeteria worker, custodian, bus driver, athletic coach, advisor to an extracurricular activity, or a paraprofessional. So that's the only language piece that's actually changing in our current policy. Just wanted to clarify that. So that will be the change. It used to just say one or more students, and that entire section I read will be added to reflect the changes that have been made in Mass General Law 71, Chapter 37. That is all. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Quinney. When are you meeting again in policy?
That meeting hasn't been set.
It has not been set.
Correct.
Maybe when it's set next time, we can let the school committee know, and Dr. O'Leary know, and maybe we can settle some of the issues in subcommittee, delve in a little further. So do we want to postpone this first reading, or do we want to continue the first reading and work through changes for the second reading, if necessary?
I would,
Discussion?
yeah, I would just say that some of the things that Dr. O'Leary is alluding to aren't necessarily policy, but procedures
Procedure.
when bullying has taken place, which would be the purview of the superintendent, I think.
And I personally don't feel like we have to postpone this.
Okay.
People have gone through it. We have 2 other opportunities to go through this as well.
Yep. Thank you. Okay. So we have a motion to waive the reading of the first reading of the revised policy file JICFB, bullying prevention. Can I?
Second.
have a
Second.
roll call? We made a motion. So now we, roll call vote, please.
Mrs. Quinney?
Yes.
Mrs. Congdon?
Yes.
Mrs. Donovan?
Yes?
Mrs. McLaughlin?
Yes.
Dr. O'Leary?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Agenda item 14B, the next regular school committee meeting will be held November 5th, 2013, in council chambers at 7 p.m. Agenda item number 15, executive session. We're going to need a vote to go into
Mrs.
executive.
McLaughlin,
I'm
I just
sorry.
had something I wanted to request.
Oh, I'm
under
sorry,
new
there was a,
business.
I apologize.
It's okay.
Any other new business? Mrs. Donovan?
Thank you. Just one thing, I wanted to first of all welcome Miss Julianne Collins to the school committee and to do our minutes, so welcome. I know you're working hard over there, so thank you for that. And I do believe that you are also taking the minutes for the town council. Is that
Yes, like a fill-in at this point.
okay? The only reason why I ask is I don't know, Madam Chair, and I know that Mrs. Congdon has already made this step, and I believe perhaps it makes good sense that the rest of us should follow suit. Relative to our subcommittee meetings, if we should set almost like a calendar for the rest of the school year, so that if you are expected to be at any of those subcommittee meetings, you can know ahead of time as to what your responsibilities will be for our regular school committee meetings in addition to our subcommittee meetings to assure that they do not conflict with your fill-in roles on the town side. But that's something that would be helpful to you.
That would work, yes, that would be very
Okay.
helpful. Thank you.
All right, so based on that, then that is something that I will work on for curriculum. I'll, with my other two members, Dr. O'Leary and Dr. Domingo, we can set a schedule that I will forward to you, Madam Chair, and then you can pass that along to Ms. Collins.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much.
Very good idea. We'll have a master calendar. Is there any other new business? Mrs. Quinney?
Madam Chair, thank you. I want to thank Aspira for inviting members of the school committee to attend their Hispanic Heritage Month celebration on October 11th. As Severina had said, they honored past graduates of Southbridge High School from the Hispanic community, and I think it was a wonderful celebration of one of the many really great things that are happening in our communities, and the steps and accomplishments that students that have graduated from Southbridge High School have gone on to do, and I think it highlighted that, and it was a great night to be a part of, and I wanted to thank Aspira for that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Quinney. Mrs. Congdon?
Thank you, Madam Chair. That I also wanted to thank Aspira. It was a really nice night. It was nice to see people that I graduated with. I just also wanted to mention, I wanted to thank Sydney Rivas, who gave a speech that night, and he presented different statistics, and it was just nice to see how far different Hispanics in the community have come and how they're even giving back to their community now, and it was a really fun night. I also wanted to announce that the PTA will be holding a Halloween party this Friday, October 25th, from 6:30 to 8 in the old Southbridge High School gym. The event is free to PTA members. The admission is $10 with a paid PTA membership will give you free admission into the event, and it should be a really fun time. So it's 6:30 to 8 this Friday, October 25th, in the old Southbridge High School gym. I also wanted to thank and mention that we went to homecoming, and it was a really nice time. I wanted to thank all of the members of the different organizations and say that they did a really great job with the booths that they had behind the bleachers. They were great, and we enjoyed some really good food. And my family had gone, and my kids really had a blast. Touching upon what Dr. O'Leary had said, it was a really great game. It was nice to see the school spirit and the people who attended the event. It was a really nice night, and we saw some old alumni and old friends. And teachers were there, and the band did a great job, and it was a really fun night. And it was nice to see all the seniors and their families being honored. So it was a great time. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Congdon. Dr. O'Leary?
Yeah, just very quickly, thanks for reminding me. I didn't want to leave the band out. You have to add that to the whole thing, the national anthem and the green grass and the screaming and the band. It was a really fun time.
I agree. I attended, and that was a great, great game. That was a lot of fun to be at. And the spirit was infectious. You could feel it, and that was the best part. So, well done. Yeah. Any other new business? All set? Okay, seeing none, there will be an executive session tonight. We're going to vote to go into executive session to discuss strategy with respect to collective bargaining for union and non-union personnel, or litigation to the extent that an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the bargaining or litigation position of the governmental body pursuant to Chapter 30A, Section 21A, Part 3, and the chair so declares. I need a roll call vote.
I make a motion?
That is the motion, right?
Oh, that is?
Yeah, that is.
Oh, okay,
Second.
okay.
Or motion, so moved.
Need a roll call vote.
Do we have a motion in a second?
Yes.
Yes.
I missed.
Who made the motion? I'm sorry. Vote to go into executive session.
Dr.
Motion.
O'Leary.
Dr. O'Leary made the
Okay,
motion.
and who made the second?
I did.
Mrs. Donovan.
Okay, thank you.
Apologize. Roll call, please.
Sure. Mrs. Congdon?
Yes.
Mrs. Donovan?
Yes.
Mrs. McLaughlin?
Yes.
Dr. O'Leary?
Yes.
Mrs. Quinney?
Yes.
Executive session?
Thank you. We will return to open session for purposes of adjournment only. Thank you.